Nigel, can you hear me? Nigel, is Ranjit here? Can you hear me?
Hang on a minute. I can hear you, Ranjit, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Ranjit, you need to go on mute because we're about to start.
We need to mute, yes.
Pray silence for the mayor, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
Now it's working. Welcome to all members of the council, as well as the members of the public who may be watching online. Before the meeting formally begins, Rabbi Harshi Vogel from Ealing United Synagogue will bless the meeting.
Good evening. You may be seated. I believe this is the first full meeting taking place after the start of the pandemic. It comes days after the horrific murder of a serving MP, Sir David Amias. My thoughts and prayers are with him and his family. I would like to, if I may, dedicate this thought and this prayer to him, his family, and to all of you. At a time like this, where do we look for inspiration or guidance or a coping mechanism to help us get through such a tragic event? We have the 5 books of Moses that are separated throughout the year. We read one portion of the law every single week. And it is this week we study, or we learn the story of our father Abraham or Avraham, the father of the 3 monotheistic religions. And it tells us the story of him sitting in front of his tent, his home, with all 4 doors open on all directions. People used to come in either for a chat, to eat or sleep, or even to pray. Abraham was the epitome of all kindness. We try today, ever since that story, to emulate his hospitality in such a deep and great way. The result of which, God told him that I will protect you and make you into a big nation. Not only will I protect you, I will bless you for all those people who have done good deeds in your name or because of you will be blessed, and you will get their reward. At a time like this, when you hear about decreasing our efforts or decreasing what we do in public life, I urge you not to decrease, but increase. If you go into a dark room and light a small candle, it can take away much of the darkness. Abraham was a man who stood up to dictatorships, corruption, and evilness. He stood with the words of God, how we should spread kindness around us. And therefore he had an open home for all those who were looking for hope and anything they need in order to have that hope. In public life, like your good selves, where Sir David Amias, his last act on this world was he had an open home, inviting people, no matter what background, what affiliation, or what party we belong to. Everyone knew that Sir David Amias is there, hopefully, to give hope. You are coming here today, or this room is full of people whose only mission is to give those around us the hope, give families hope, people hope, and communities helping the society go from strength to strength. At this time, I urge the Almighty, just like he blessed Abraham with protection. And I say this, may God protect those who protect others. And the blessing is, may you be protected for all the good work that you do for the benefit of others. And may God give you the health, the happiness, true happiness, both externally and internally, together with your families and the communities you belong to. May God be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to stay, you can sit. If you want to go, you are free. Thank you. Thank you. Councillors, tonight's meeting will be broadcast live and a recording retained on the council YouTube site. Therefore, I will presume everyone consent to this happening. If you do not consent to this, then you should leave the meeting. There are a number of councillors who will be joining us remotely tonight via Zoom. These members will not be counted as formally being in attendance at the meeting for the purpose of Section 85 of the Local Government Act 1972. However, their virtual attendance will be recorded in the minutes under item 1. The members in attendance virtually will be able to speak at the meeting, but won't be able to take part in any votes. Those who are watching or attending virtually, I have got access to Zoom chat, so they can send a message only if it's relevant to this meeting and is for me. Thank you. So we move on to the agenda, and are there any apologies?
I've received no apologies for absence, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Those who are attending via Zoom, would you be able to read the name for record?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. I have Councillor Kamaljit Dinsa, Binda Rai, Chris Summers, Carla Lusawadi, D. Martin, Gary Basutil, Harbhajan Kaur, Jaskaran Chauhan, Nigel Sumner, Paul Driscoll, Theresa Byrne, Tim Murtagh, Karanveer Singh Dabwell, Paul Conlon, Praveen Anand, Daniel Crawford, Hitesh Taylor, Julian Bell, Kamaldeep Kaur Sahota, Kate Crawford, Linda Burke, Gurmit Mann, Mohammed Aslam, Rajinder Mann, Ray Wall, Simon Woodruff, Sitara Anjum, and I've got a couple of other names on there I can't identify. I think one of them might be Ranjit Deer, and there's somebody on there is L. Taylor. I'm not exactly sure who that is, but I'm sure they'll identify themselves on the chat, and I can correct the record. Are there any councillors who are attending virtually who are sharing a device?
If any councillor is attending and the name was not mentioned, then they can send a message. Thank you. Second item on the agenda is matter to be considered in private, and there is none. Declaration of interest. Yes, Councillor Raza.
I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest in the item, sorry, don't remember it just yet, 6, because I'm a trustee for the Young Ealing Foundation.
Thank you. Any other? No. Thank you. A meeting was held on 20th of July, and we are going to agree the minutes of that meeting.
Mr. Mayor, there is one correction. Councillor Gallant was present at the meeting.
Okay, noted. That correction is made. Other than that, minutes are agreed. Thank you. So I've got few announcements to make, which I'm going to do now. It's with great sadness that I announce the passing of former councillor and honorary alderman Ellery Ebenezer, who passed away in August 2021, aged 73 years. Ellery was a councillor for South Fieldwood from 1978 to 1994, when she retired. She was an honorary alderman for the borough and was mayoress to the late Diana Pagan, who was mayor in 2006-2007. Ellery served as chair of social services and chair of employees relations. Ellery is survived by a younger sister, Catherine, and younger brother, Gareth. I was privileged to attend her funeral and meet her brother and sister last month. On behalf of Ealing Council, our deepest sympathy go out to her family. And I've got a few councillors who would like to pay tribute and speak. Councillor Johnson, you want to speak on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ironically, we'd seen Ellery at about July time, because a number of us have been at Harvey Rose's memorial at St Albans Church, and she seemed very well. We spoke to her, and it was quite well attended. Of course, we were still at the end of COVID. And it was very sad and so sudden. I think we were all quite shocked. I first met Ellery when I was elected in 1986, which was obviously a long time ago, before some of you in this room were even born. But she was a very dedicated person. She enjoyed her social services role. She did care about the elderly, young people in the borough, and that's something that continued. Even when she still wasn't a councillor, she was active in local politics. And in fact, one of the things that was quite interesting, her and Glenn Barnum, who some of you may have known, who was my fellow councillor in Heathfield Ward, which became South Acton, they got on very well, and they continued to be friends and saw each other after they both stood down from the council. And he was quite shocked as well and contacted me when he'd heard. And I know that Tony Young's going to say a lot more, because he was a personal friend, and him and his wife, Janet, did a lot to help organise the funeral. It was extremely well attended. I saw people like Martin Mallam, which is a name from the past. I hadn't seen him for about 20 years. He'd been a Conservative leader many years ago on the council. But Ellery had worked for the BBC, and she knew a lot of the people in the acting world, like Glenn did, because Glenn Barnum was an equity officer, and that's how the two of them knew each other quite well. Her 25 years at the BBC were useful for her, as she could call on big names to come and open fates, as Glenn Barnum could for us. So we'd suddenly get in the hall in Acton some famous star, and people would wonder how they got them there. But it was because of Glenn's connections. But Ellery was very dedicated to helping young people and the elderly. Her and Glenn, as I said, had a very good working relationship. She continued in that role. She did lots of things, and she was, as you said, chair of certitude. She did lots in that field, and I'll let Tony say more, but every time I bumped into her, she was a caring person. She did help where she could, and she did a lot of work, and Southfield will miss her. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Young, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Ellery was a very special person. She served with me for 16 years on the council from 78 to 94. But when she left the council, she didn't rest on her laurels. She took appointment as the chair of an NHS trust in her beloved home of Wales. And in London, she continued to act as on the Employment Tribunal Service and the Valuation Tribunal Service, and became chair of the Board of Certitude, an organisation which provides support to people with learning disabilities, autism, and mental health. She was a very special person, as I say. She dedicated much of her life to helping others. And I'm much saddened by her loss, made much worse by the sudden and unexpected.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar, you want to say a few words? Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. I'll start again, Mr. Mayor. So I knew Hilary, a dear friend, for nearly 30 years. She to me was an unusual friend who was quietly confident, helpful, utterly supportive, and loyal. She had a reserved nature, but the kindness and understanding shone brightly in her eyes. She was also someone who would not hesitate to point out unfairness, and point out she did. Her diligence and efficiency in her charity work, her help during election campaigns, tirelessly supporting colleagues and friends was commendable. Her sudden loss has saddened many of us, her family and friends. She will surely be missed.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. Another sad news, and I'm deeply saddened to announce the tragic death of Member of Parliament, Sir David Amess, aged 69 years, who devoted 40 years of his life to serving his community. This brutal act of violence is appalling, and on behalf of the London Borough of Ealing, I send my deepest condolences to his family, colleagues, and friends. And I would invite Leader of the Council, Councillor Peter Mason, to speak on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's all too recently that we gathered in this place to express our horror, sorrow, and outrage that a Member of Parliament had been assassinated whilst performing their role in pursuit of the public good. 5 years ago, we mourned Joe Cox and shared our shock at an attack that hit the very heart of British democracy. Today, we mourn, and we send the Council's thoughts to his family, his friends, and to his constituents. We will know more in the fullness of time about the circumstances of his murder, but at times like this, our sorrow and our outrage know no partisan bounds. Following Friday's dreadful news, flags on this town hall building were lowered to fly at half-mast, remain there until his funeral. I wrote also a short note to Councillor Stafford to express my and the Labour Group's sincere sorrow, sympathy and condolence, and I reiterate that this evening. The impact of an atrocity like this, we know, has reverberations well beyond the immediate family, friends and colleagues. There's kinship within political parties, we know. And I know members opposite will have known Sir David, as I know Councillor Stafford did, and be grieving and supporting those in their grief. Sir David was murdered in an act of terror whilst attending a constituency surgery. Such surgery sessions are at the heart of what makes Britain's system of democracy unique. At every level of government, whether our own as councillors or at Westminster, elected politicians make ourselves available to speak directly with our electors, to hear their views, to share their problems, and to do our best to help. This kind of direct access to often very senior politicians may seem sometimes antithetical to the seemingly never-ending increasing need for security, but that access is vital. It speaks to the character of our democracy that our neighbours, who live just a little further along Uxbridge Road, can obtain an appointment with a Prime Minister, talk about their housing benefit, universal credit, their immigration status, and that the residents of Camden and Kentish Town and Highgate can do the same with the leader of the opposition. We can't let that be swept away in the face of targeted terror. Sadly, though, the list of politicians harmed just for carrying out the basic duty to their constituents is getting too long. Sir David murdered at his surgery. Jo Cox murdered as she left her surgery. Stephen Timms seriously injured in a stabbing at his, and Andy Pennington, a councillor killed at a surgery protecting the MP that they worked for. I know that many councillors in this chamber were shortly expecting to restart face-to-face surgeries after the pandemic. And I know that many will have been given pause for thought by last Friday's terrible events. The council, we will be offering additional advice on personal safety to be provided to members, and that advice sessions be organised, and that lone working safety devices be issued to any member who wants one. We'll also ensure that assessments are undertaken for surgery venues to ensure that we minimise risks. But we cannot be deterred from undertaking our duties to our residents or to become less accessible in the face of terror. So, Mr. Mayor, let me end where I began by expressing our sorrow and our shock at this attack on our democracy, and by extending my sympathies, the sympathies of my group in this council, and our condolences to all who knew Sir David. Thank you.
Now, Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Gregory Stafford will speak on this.
Mr. Mayor, I rise to pay tribute to Sir David Amess, to condemn his senseless murder last Friday, and to offer my and the Conservative Group's sincere condolences to his family and friends at this devastating time. David was one of the humblest, kindest, and sincerest men I ever had the fortune to know. One of Parliament's characters, fun, friendly, unconventional, and outspoken. When I worked in Parliament, it was a rare day when David wouldn't pop his head round the door of our office, mischievous eyes twinkling, to announce that we'd all been sacked, or conversely, that we'd all been made peers of the realm, or some other bonkers, often inappropriate, but never malicious joke. David became the MP for Basildon in 1983, the embodiment of what was then known as Essex Man, the archetypal voter who helped, archetypal aspirational voter who helped deliver a landslide victory for Margaret Thatcher that year. And he again triumphed against the odds in the 92 general election, when he unexpectedly held the seat. My colleagues and supporters go out and rejoice and celebrate, he declared. And from that moment on, David was cheered by his Conservative colleagues every time he rose to his feet in Parliament. He held the seat until 97, when he realised that it would be lost to Labour after boundary changes, and switched his loyalty and devotion to nearby Southend West. And for years he campaigned for Southend to become a city, mentioning it virtually every week in Parliament. I'm so pleased for him, though in such tragic circumstances, that Southend will now become a city. Although for many years he was the parliamentary aide to former Cabinet Minister Michael Portillo, he never held ministerial office himself. He was too unorthodox for that. Instead, he chose to dedicate his career to his beloved Essex and the causes he cared about most. David was one of those rare MPs who earned cross-party respect for the conviction he brought to his opinions and campaigns. Those who didn't know him well might have characterised him simply as a Thatcherite, which he certainly was, or, due to his deeply and sincerely held Catholic views, a reactionary, which he certainly wasn't. He was socially conservative. He supported capital punishment and opposed abortion, and he was an early Eurosceptic. But he was also a strong supporter of animal rights, including leading campaigns to ban cages for game birds and end the transport of live animals for export. He supported a fox hunting ban and was the patron of the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation. And he campaigned against fuel poverty, advocated tackling obesity, and raised awareness of endometriosis. He was one of those MPs who used Parliament to sponsor bills, to sit on committees, to form alliances, so that he could shape law from the backbenches. To me, he was a true friend, and always interested in my family and my progress in politics. Our shared Catholicism was always a source of discussion and humour whenever we met, as we did at a Conservative Party conference in Manchester a fortnight ago. And I am forever grateful to him for inviting me to join him and other MPs in meeting Pope Benedict in Rome in 2006. There are many amusing stories about David, but my favorite one is the one I witnessed firsthand on that trip to the Vatican. And this story I've noticed has evolved in the telling, but essentially we had an audience with the Pope in what would be a hall, I would say at least 5 times, maybe 6 times bigger than the one we are in today. And we were in the front row, and as the Pope came down the line, David had brought a rosary, a Catholic prayer beads essentially, to have the Pope bless. And there was a rail in front of us to stop us grabbing the Pope, but there was no rail for the tens of thousands of people behind us who are now pushing against us. And as the Pope came down the line, David tried to get the rosary out of his pocket, but because of the crush, couldn't manage it. And eventually, just as the Pope came along, he said, "Holy Father, could you bless this?" And the only thing he managed to pull out of his pocket was a mint. And the Pope blessed the mint. And from that day on, that mint was mounted and framed in David's office, the holy mint, the holy polo. It wasn't a polo, unfortunately, but it could have been. David always took his work seriously, but himself never. In the wake of his murder, 2 themes seem to have emerged, which I want to touch on briefly. First, much has been said about the worsening nature of public discourse and how we treat our elected representatives. It's clear to me, I think, and to most, that those who believe and espouse conservative values are not scum, and the abuse faced by all politicians, but especially often women, conservatives, and Jewish people, is totally unacceptable. It is a despicable fact that MPs are bombarded with bile. It's popular to the point of banality to hate them. But at surgeries like the one David was conducting on Friday, MPs like David go above and beyond to listen to, engage with, and make themselves available to everyone, even those who wish them great harm. And how can you hate someone that does that? Discussion is needed over the tone of politics and social media. It's dangerous and toxic. But from what we know, that is a separate issue to what led to the killing of David. He was seemingly murdered by an Islamist terrorist extremist. And even if we had the most polite public discourse, this would not have changed the motivation of that evil murderer. And we mustn't confuse or conflate these serious but separate issues, for in doing so, we risk tackling neither appropriately or successfully. Second, as Councillor Mason has mentioned, that steps must be taken to protect elected representatives from such attacks. This is a sensible and totally reasonable response. We all must be feeling more wary since last Friday about our interaction with the public. But David was murdered while doing the most public-spirited of acts, which sits at the heart of our democracy, holding a constituency surgery, listening to anyone and everyone that asks for assistance and doing what he could to help. I know that he would not have wanted his senseless death to lead to any diminution of interaction between politicians and the public. Indeed, I would go further and say that if anything good is to come out of this murder, it should be an increase in the connection between elected representatives and their electorate, demonstrating to them that we do care about their problems and issues. David was what they call an old school parliamentarian, the epitome of a constituency MP who died serving those he was so proud to represent. An attack on an MP is an attack on public service. It is an attack on our democracy. It is an attack on the soul of our nation. But more personally, the loss of David makes our public service, our democracy, and our nation all vastly poorer. I will always remember David as that kind, friendly, mischievous, and gentle man, and my condolences and prayers are with his wife, Julia, and children at this terrible time.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Councillor Gary Malcolm, would pay tribute to Sir David Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Liberal Democrat Group share the condolences given. As public figures, whether we're councillors or MPs or other forms of elected representatives, we need to be present and put ourselves at our surgeries and at public meetings so we can speak and listen to residents who've got many wide-ranging problems. I think Sir David was clearly someone who was extremely dedicated, and he must have helped many, many thousands and tens of thousands of people with the advice he and his team have given people in his 40 years as an elected member. The tragedy makes me more determined than ever to make sure that we don't close our surgeries or we don't try and hide behind the safety of a building. A month or two ago, we started surgeries again, and we do need to look, as Councillor Stafford said, look at the arrangements to make them as safe as possible. But I go back and I look at not just the tragedy that a few days ago at Friday, or Joe Cox 5 years ago, but also 20 years ago, it comes back to when Nigel Jones, who was an MP then, his member of staff who was working with him passed away when she was attacked. So it's not always the elected representative who suffers, as we did recently, but we must think also of the council staff at town halls, those who work for MPs and councillors. They are putting themselves at risk at surgeries sometimes, and we must try and make all of those places safe as possible. So I'll end by just saying the Lib Dem Group pass on the condolences to all those who knew Sir David Amos, his family, and especially those in the room today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. A representative from Liberal Democrats also wanted to speak on former Councillor Illeri, and we have recorded that, so we will move on to the next bit. Is that okay? Or you want to say a few words? Thank you. Thank you. So if you can all please join me to stand up for 1 minute silence for the former councillor and Sir David Amos. Thank you. Okay, now I've got some good news as well, and I would like to welcome Councillor Claire Tighe to her first council meeting here in Ealing. Congratulations on your election. Councillor Tighe was elected as Labour councillor for the Hobain ward here in Ealing last month, I think. Welcome to the Ealing Council's first meeting, Claire. Congratulations to all those who participated in the Ealing Marathon in September. Well done to you all. I would like to also thank for supporting my chosen charity Home Start Ealing by attending my fundraising events. I also look forward to some of you at my fundraising charity dinner on Friday, the 26th of November in Gifto's Lahore Kadai restaurant in Southall. Further details will be emailed to you from the Mayor's office later this week. And those who couldn't attend last dinner, Councillor Anand, I will make sure you are invited. Now, lastly, but certainly not least, I wish everyone a happy Black History Month. Now we've got a petition for debate from the public, and we are limited on time, and I will ask Lily Conley Woods, who will present the petition for debate, and you have 5 minutes to introduce the petition, Lily.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. My name is Lily and I am a Ealing Young Champion, and I am here to present a petition to you to save the Young Adult Centre. The Young Adult Centre is a safe space and a community hub to many young people in Southall and has been since the 1980s. Now, the youth centre is at risk of permanent closure to make way for housing. The Act serves the children and the young people of Southall. It brings together different communities, provides leisure activities and support for people. It is a safe haven for deprived communities who are at risk of violence and crime. Southall is among the 20% most deprived wards in England, and services like youth centres prove vital in keeping children off the streets and in reducing local crime rates. It promotes good mental and physical health through increased social interaction and sports. It provides a space to widen interaction with other people and other cultures. There are only 3 purpose-built youth centres in the borough. The closure of the YAC would result in an already deprived demographic suffering further deprivation. In the last 10 years, 2 youth centres have closed in Southall. Hounslow has 5 youth centres and Hillingdon has 7, despite Ealing's youth population of 108,400 being over 35% higher than Hounslow and 60% higher than Hillingdon. According to the GLA database, between 2014 and 2021, planning permission has been given for 1,643 social housing and London affordable units, of which around 3% are social housing. The proposal is that the YAC site will be used for 28 London affordable units and 31 shared ownership units. So realistically, this will not have an impact on the current social housing crisis in Ealing. If the council agree to save the YAC from demolition, the Ealing Young Champions and the Young Ealing Foundation will work with the council to ensure that the YAC is able to provide a wealth of services to children and young people in the area by working with partners who address the key priorities set out by the Ealing Young Champions, which are improving mental health, feeling safe both online and within your community, and providing opportunities for future stability. The Ealing Young Champions is a committee of young people supported by the Young Ealing Foundation, who represent the diverse voice of the young people in the London Borough of Ealing. We are leading and undertaking all of the work related to save the YAC from closure because young people are suffering from a lack of social interaction, which is having an adverse effect on our health. Throughout the pandemic, waiting lists for mental health services lengthened significantly. One of our young champions spent over 2 years on a waiting list for child and adolescent mental health services in Ealing. Centres like the YAC are used by other boroughs as hubs to attract funding to supplement the seriously depleted budgets of vital local services for young people. In Westminster, the average spend per young person on services is £844 per head, compared to just £67 in Ealing. This disparity between Ealing and other London boroughs could be addressed by having youth hubs like the YAC, which act as a focal point for funding. The social return on investment of this strategy over the next 25 years would be leagues ahead of any short-term gains by developing the YAC site for housing. Helping children and teenagers who use the YAC has always been important, especially now as times are getting more complicated.
1 minute
It's
left.
important to listen to what children and teenagers have to say, because the words that we carry can change the world, and places like the YAC give us the support and creativity to do that. The majority of us young Ealing champions will be over 18 by next May, including myself, and we will be voting for councillors that demonstrate the desire to build us a better future, as well as all of the other young people of Ealing that cannot be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the portfolio holder is going to respond to this petition, and there will be more councillors speaking. If you keep track of time, that would be good because we've got quite heavy agenda. Otherwise, we'll have to go beyond 9:30. So over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Lily, for presenting so eloquently. Mr. Mayor, as the Cabinet Member for a Fairer Start and a Labour councillor representing Southall Broadway, I absolutely want to ensure that we have great youth services in Southall. Mr. Mayor, we're really pleased today to commit to invest the proceeds from this development in new youth facilities for Southall. This will include a brand new state-of-the-art youth centre, as well as investment in interim youth facilities at Dormers Wells and the Dominion Centre while it's being built. We've pledged to be an open, inclusive and transparent council, so I want to outline all the work that's gone into this commitment. There are 13,000 10 to 24-year-olds in Southall and higher levels of deprivation than the rest of the borough. We know that more people are struggling as a result of COVID-19. It's more important than ever that Southall's children and young people have brilliant youth facilities and a centre they can feel at home in. The Yak is one of Ealing's 3 main youth centres. We know what a vital community hub it has been for Southall residents and young people. We've heard the concerns raised about the impact if Southall were to lose such an important space for young people, and we agree. We want to reassure young people of our commitment to high-quality youth services across the borough and in Southall. The Yak site was chosen as a Broadway Living Development site in 2016 and will deliver approximately 60 genuinely affordable homes and bring in GLA grants for us to build even more homes. The housing crisis is hitting everyone in London and Ealing, and building family-sized homes like this is part of our efforts to ensure our young people can afford to stay in the borough that they call home. But we're absolutely not going to put those plans into action without moving forward on a great replacement youth centre in Southall. Along with Cabinet colleagues, I've been in discussion with the Youth Service, young people, including Young Ealing Foundation this morning. We've also talked about the importance of the Yak for our looked after children in corporate parent panel meetings. Young people told me how much they value the Yak and youth services and what a difference it makes to their lives. We wanted to make sure we chose the best facility for Southall, so we started by visiting the Yak and talking to young people about what they needed to see in a replacement. Mr. Mayor, for the benefit of councillors who may not have visited this site, it's a great dedicated space with a mix of internal activities and an external area for sports. We looked at Dormers Wells Hub initially as a replacement and decided it was not suitable because it was simply too small to be used as a permanent solution. After asking council officers to draw up a specification for replacing the facilities elsewhere, we visited sites in Southall that might meet our requirements. We then asked for a review of all possible council premises in Southall. Myself, Councillor Manro, Councillor Raza, we visited all possibilities, including Dormers Wells Hub, Southall Manor House, the Dominion Centre and Southall Park. After looking at all sites, we've come up with an interim proposal and 2 permanent options. Our interim solution is to use both the Dormers Wells Hub and the Dominion Centre for youth activities. This isn't good enough as a permanent plan because the footprint of Dormers Wells is too small to be able to meet the ongoing needs of young people. In the interim, however, it gives young people a space that is entirely theirs, which is important. We have 2 permanent proposals. One is Southall Park, which we can do more quickly and with added community benefit, including the potential for a cafe and public toilets. The other is the possibility of a new youth centre alongside the new development at the Green. Clearly, there are pros and cons of both of these options, and we'll need to work through these in detail and work with young people to see what works for Southall. There are lots of factors we need to take into account, including safeguarding. While there are no particular tensions at these sites, we want to remain responsive, and we know from past experience that the presence of the youth service will help mitigate any potential safeguarding or gang tensions rather than exacerbate them. Mr. Mayor, I want to be clear that young people's views have and continue to be central to future plans. There is ongoing engagement with the Young Ealing Foundation and a date set for the 22nd of November to do a joint consultation. The consultation will look at youth options and the delivery model, feeding into a wider youth action plan and playing a central role in the design of a permanent new site for youth service provision in Southall. Mr. Mayor, young people campaigning for youth services in Southall have collected an impressive number of signatures. I want to congratulate the petitioners this evening for a very professional and effective campaign, and we look forward to working with you to design a new state-of-the-art youth offer in Southall.
Thank you. Thank you. From Conservative Group, Councillor Milliken will speak on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And may I start by thanking Lily for speaking so eloquently this evening, and frankly, for getting so many people to sign the petition. So well done, and you brought it in front of us today and made us consider this really important issue. But frankly, I think it's quite wrong that the council is considering even closing this youth centre. It seems one of the ideas that the council have dreamt up is to bulldoze the site and then build 59 dwellings there, and then offer part of Southall Park to build on to house the youth centre. So let me get this right. The council are prepared to offer up valuable green space to build a new youth centre. Let me get that right. Let me repeat that. The council are going to offer up green space, Mr. Mayor, to build flats. So it's just plain wrong. I mean, frankly, you could call it immoral to do that. In the meanwhile, you've suggested a move in the short term, as Councillor Napal has said, to Dormers Wells and to the Dominion Centre. And as she has said, the Dormers Wells site is too small. And it's certainly not large enough to house all the facilities that are at the Young Adult Centre. So it's really sad to say this, but young people from outside the area are far less likely to venture onto the postcode of the Golf Links estate. But there is no such issue in Southall, Mr. Mayor, at the Parkview Road site. There are precious few youth centres in the borough, as Lily has said so eloquently this evening. So frankly, this is a safe space for young people to mix with others, with fantastic facilities. It's got a great outdoor space for sports. It houses gym equipment, a beauty salon. I'm trying to remember the things that are there. A kitchen, a juice bar, a music production centre. It needs a little bit of work. It's a little bit on the old side, but there's a music production centre there. Facilities for creative arts and song. It also houses all the equipment and office space for the Duke of Edinburgh scheme, which we can all support and which gives such benefits to the young people in the borough. They have all the equipment for the DOV expeditions with boots, anoraks, and all the paraphernalia that young people, so they don't miss out. So anybody can go. I gather Villiers High School, Ealing Fields High School, just to name two, have recently been using the facilities there for the DOV. There can be no other elements, and they also cover other elements, the DOV, their skills, sports, and so on. So the Young Adult Centre is in reasonable nick. Nothing but a lick of paint and a bit of tender loving care, and perhaps to repair the AstroTurf won't fix. But Mr. Mayor, the council have to listen to the young people and either abandon their plan to close the centre or come up with a workable solution. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Ball from Liberal Democrats will speak. Can you stay near the microphone when you speak, when you stand, because we've got a few issues from the virtual members. So if you can stay near.
Yes, I think I am rather tall, so I'm rather a long way from the microphone.
Councillor Milliken's microphone was far away when you were talking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The new administration pays lip service to fighting inequality, but at the same time, it is pushing ahead with the closure of the Young Adult Centre in Parkview Road in Southall, which is a vital facility for young people in the area of all ethnic groups. Many of these young people are from disadvantaged backgrounds and are precisely the type of people the council should be helping, both in order to give them the best opportunities, but also as a distractionary activity to avoid criminal involvement in future. The Liberal Democrat group has always supported greater youth centre provision, and so we're entirely in support of Ealing Youth Champions and their petition tonight. 2 youth centres in our borough have been closed over the last decade. We must not allow the Yak to be added to that shameful list. We must defend it from demolition and save this vital service for our young people, as eloquently set out by Lily in presenting the petition. The original closure plan was formulated by the previous cabinet, and we've heard assurances that this was going to be reassessed by the new cabinet. Tonight, Councillor Nagpal's response seemed to recognise how valuable the YAC is, but it fell far short of committing to a replacement with an equivalent capacity on a permanent dedicated site. And there is a great risk of the service fizzling out if it's in temporary buildings for years. I think we need more than a couple of possibilities for a permanent site. Mr. Mayor, we need a specific replacement that Ealing Youth Champions are happy with before there is any possibility of the existing YAC being closed, or else we need to keep the existing YAC on the existing site permanently. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if Councillor Ball, I'll be kind, if Councillor Ball was paying attention to Councillor Nagpal, he would have heard those assurances. Let me first start by saying to Lily, congratulations for both a passionate and powerful speech. Let it never be said that young people in this borough do not have the power to inform the decisions that we take as a council, because you are the people who hold us to account, absolutely. And it shouldn't matter whether you are 18 and above or 18 and below. Each and every young person is a fully paid up member of our civic life. And thank you very much for putting this petition forward. When we said that we would be an open, transparent and inclusive council, we meant it. We meant being open about the challenges that we face, transparent about the plans that we will put in place to solve them, and inclusive about how we wish to implement them. I'm afraid the opposition won't particularly like us drawing their attention to the fact that this borough has 36 pence in every pound that it had in 2010. And I can see Councillor Steed rolling his head, the usual reminder, Councillor Steed, that your party put their party into power and began 11 years of austerity. What that has meant for the London Borough of Ealing is for us to have to take difficult but necessary decisions about the priorities that we place on the scant and limited resources that we have. We are fighting inequality, and one of the elements of fighting inequality is remembering that there are currently 2,500 families in temporary accommodation and 11,000 families on the housing waiting list. A significant number of those people are residents of Southall in precarious private rented sector who have children that use our youth services. Those needs are balanced absolutely against the needs of young people to have youth services, high quality youth services that help them become the adults that they need to be, to support them in becoming powerful people, as Lily has so clearly demonstrated. And what we have said very clearly in terms of the challenges that we face is we do have challenges, and we have a clear solution. A temporary solution, one in which we'll see youth services expanded not just into the Dormers Wells hub, but also into the Dominion Centre, investment in public buildings for public good. And we will also, Mr. Mayor, as Councillor Nagpal has committed this evening, and I reiterate that commitment, we will build a brand new young adult centre for young people, but most importantly, with young people. And we will do that in a way that puts young people at the heart of that process. They will design that building. They will move into that building. And I hope that we can work with the community and that we can work with voluntary and charitable organisations to put that building in the hands of young people and let them hold it in trust forevermore. So we don't find ourselves in a situation in however many decades' time when the party opposite cry crocodile tears once more over the cuts that their government have overseen to our council. And we protect what Southall needs, a modern, purpose-built centre for young people well into the future.
Thank you. Councillor Nagpal, you want to sum up now?
Mr. Mayor, We've had some real negativity from the opposition today, and I'm sure that will continue. Councillor Milliken spoke about all the facilities that the YAC has, the gym, the juice bar, the beauty salon, and he talked about the Duke of Edinburgh scheme and the equipment. That's going to be considered by any future development, Councillor Milliken, because we want young people to design the new youth centre. Councillor Ball mentioned that he didn't receive assurances about a new facility. In my summing up now, I'm going to tell him once again about the issues we're facing and about our exciting offer for young people. Councillor Mason talked about the challenges we face, but also about the commitment to high quality youth services in Southall, and that we'll build a new youth centre that young people will design themselves. Mr. Mayor, we're in the midst of a housing crisis with a fundamentally broken market, and it was agreed in 2016 that the YAC site be used for urgently needed, genuinely affordable housing to deliver around 60 family-sized homes. The truth is that we need both genuinely affordable homes and a youth centre in Southall. So we're using this as an opportunity, Councillor Ball, to invest the proceeds from the development in a new state-of-the-art centre at a new site. We know that change can be difficult, particularly when there's more work to do to design and build a new centre, but we believe that investing in the long-term future of Southall and our young people is the right thing to do. This is a really exciting, once-in-a-generation opportunity for Southall's young people to work with us to design brand new facilities that work for them. We want to invest in a state-of-the-art youth centre in Southall, adaptable for different age groups, participating in various activities and with access to safe, open space. It will have all the facilities that local schools need, the Duke of Edinburgh sessions and more. I have no doubt that Southall's young people will have lots of ideas about what they want to see in a purpose-built youth centre. And because we're at an early stage, we can really get young people involved in the design and we'll update councillors with our progress. Mr. Mayor, we're really looking forward to getting started designing a new youth centre for Southall with young people for young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, we move on to the next item now, and I have no other petition from the member of public. We've got a petition, item number 8 on the agenda. We've got a petition from the member of the council, and I'll ask Councillor Praveen Anand to present your petition, Councillor Anand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the elected councillor, Labour councillor for Ealing Common, I'm submitting a petition to the council on behalf of my residents who oppose the changes to their polling station in Ealing Common and call the council to keep their polling station at the Trees Estate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anand. It's taken in. The next item is questions from the member of the public, and I have got none. Now we move on to the questions from the member of the council, and I will ask Councillor Sahota to ask a question from Councillor Mahfouz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Conservatives seem to be continuing to pursue cutting the universal credit uplifts despite the devastating impact it could have on many families. Can the portfolio holder give an update on the expected impact in Ealing?
Councillor Mahfouz.
Thank you, Councillor Karam Sahota, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. So according to August 2021 data in Ealing, there were 35,835 households on universal credit, with over a third of those households being families with children. This, quite frankly, Mr. Mayor, is a callous decision by an out-of-touch Tory government to cut £20 a week to those receiving universal credit at a time when these households need it the most. Not only does it mean that the divide between those being left behind by this government and those who are mates of this government grows ever more, it also means those households, those families, those who have been hardest hit are also clobbered even harder with an income cut of just over £1,000 a year. All whilst the cost of living is increasing. Help me out here.
The cost of weekly shop, it's going up. The cost of heating your home, it's going up. The cost of travel, it's going up. That's right, guys, it's going up. But you know what isn't going up? That's right, the amount of money in people's pockets of those who have been hardest hit by this economic policy of this Tory government, because universal credit, down. Not only is it a hit on over 35,000 families and households, Mr. Mayor, it's also swiping potentially up to £700,000 a week from our local economy here in Ealing. That's money that could have been spent in our local shops supporting our local businesses. Mr. Mayor, this decision impacting over 35,000 households here in our borough is simply reprehensible.
Thank you. Councillor Sahota, do you have supplementary?
Yes, that's a huge number of local people who are facing a cut to universal credit. Do we know more about the circumstances of individual families in this position? Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you, Councillor Sahota. These aren't just numbers; these are people. These are, these are people and families, mums, dads, young people, as we've already seen, who are going to be impacted and are being impacted by this callous decision. But let me just give you two examples. Firstly, of a family, a single parent with 3 children on universal credit. The mum struggling with the increasing cost of living, food, utilities. She needs to pay for internet for her children to be able to get them to be able to do their homework and all that homeschooling they've been asked to do. As we've already heard from Councillor Mason, she, like many others, are living in private rented accommodation, which is too expensive. And of course, the local housing allowance, the cap by this government, means that she cannot get her universal credit to cover the full cost of her rent. She's also on prepaid utility meters, which of course, again, the price of those going up, which are more expensive, of course, than the receiving regular bills. She's struggling to buy clothing and shoes for her children. Thankfully, the local welfare assistance team here in Ealing have awarded her with payments to be able to make cover those costs for the prepaid meters, for clothing, and for the food to put on her children's table. She's also been awarded discretionary housing payments to help cover the rent. But that £20 a week cut for her and her children will mean the choice between eating and heating this winter. Let me go to the other side. Talked about a family, but let me talk about a single male on universal credit who's just lost his job in the airline industry because of this pandemic, because of this economic policy. He's lost his job through no fault of his own. Understandably, he's struggling with managing bills and debts as a result of that. And again, as a result of that, he's now suffering with depression, causing him to lose weight.
1 minute.
Universal Credit is also deducting money from its ongoing award of advance payment and third-party debts that he's trying to pay off. Fortunately for him, he's been awarded a crisis payment, again, by our team, for food, clothing and living expenses. But again, for him, £20 a week will be the difference between food or fuel this winter. At least for him, there is also the plan for good jobs that I announced last time I was in this chamber. But neither of these people want to be in the position they're in, and neither can escape it by having their income cut again by this government.
Thank you. Councillor Young, you want to ask a second supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it not true that we have been given 2.6 million in the form of the Household Support Fund to hand out to the most vulnerable households in our society to mitigate any measures that you describe rising from the reduction in universal credit to its previous level? And that this is on top of the warm home discount, the cold weather payment, and the Healthy Start vouchers designed to help the poorest in our society.
Mr. Mayor, how predictable. So the £2.6 million that we've been given, whilst welcome, just going through the figures this evening, yes, that will mean that we'll be able to continue the payments that we were making before, that the government had to row back on time and time again when they said that they didn't want to provide children, our children, with meals over the school holidays
and then they kept on having to row back on that. That payment will allow us to be able to continue those payments going forward. And let's not forget, only a few months ago, they tried to row back on even that payment by making a cut to that. And we stepped in and said, actually, you know what, if you're not going to pay the full bill, we will step in and pay the full bill to cover that. So that £2.6 million will just cover that. But that is by no means a replacement for the £20 a week. That's something more like £20 a week over the half term, £20 a week over Christmas, £20 a week over Easter. You know, that's what that is. What we're talking about is £20 a week, every week, for the foreseeable future. And that's £1,000 a week, as I say, to those families who cannot afford a penny, let alone £20 a week or £1,000 a year. And as I say, again, these things claim, the Tories who claim they are the party of business, that's £700,000 a week that could have been spent in local shops and local businesses, and not a single word from them over how it's going to impact on them going forward either.
Thank you. The next question, Councillor Conti to Councillor Costigan.
Thank you. The independent review of public engagement in low traffic neighbourhoods in Ealing found that the administration's failure in respect to the public engagement leading to not only additional costs, but reputational damage, and that engagement of local people was far from best practice. How will the council ensure that this doesn't happen again?
My mic's on. It's on now. You can hear me, Mr. Mayor? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Conti, for the question. I'm sure, Councillor Conti, you are aware that this question was answered in detail at the Cabinet meeting that discussed the report only a few weeks ago. But I think, in the light of the discussion we had earlier on tonight and the events of last Friday, I'm not going to respond to political point scoring that we might have tonight, and I'm just going to repeat what I explained at the Cabinet meeting the other week. This independent report that you mentioned, we should make clear, it's an independent report that we commissioned and we published. And that's because we are an open, inclusive and transparent council. And by publishing that report, we have proved just that. So the independent review was commissioned to look into the issues around low traffic neighbourhoods, what we did right and what we could have done better. And it's a warts and all review. I've been clear about that. We don't shy away from learning from our mistakes. I think that's the only way you can progress in life, and I think residents get that. The report itself recommends that we develop a new charter setting out key principles for engaging with residents and other stakeholders on our active travel initiatives. As well as a charter, where there was also recommended that we have a citizens panel on active travel. And as part of our Cabinet meeting that discussed this report, we agreed to both of those recommendations and to a number of other recommendations. So like I say, it was our report, we commissioned it, we published it, and we have accepted all of the recommendations. So I think, Councillor Conti, we've shown they were open because we've published what we could have done better. We've been transparent because we're making clear the steps that we're going to take for the future. And we're inclusive because we want to include residents in decisions about their streets and about active travel going forward. So we've shown that we listen to local people, and I hope and pray that the parties opposite would start to listen to local people too. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Costigan. Can the portfolio holder commit that the administration won't seek to bring back the LTNs that have been removed after the local elections next year?
Thank you for the supplementary question, Councillor Conti. We've been really clear, as I've just outlined to you a second ago, that we have taken a new approach to active travel, which is open, inclusive and transparent. I just told you that, where we're going to put residents in the driving seat on these decisions. We've been absolutely clear that we're going to have a new charter, which will be developed in the next few weeks and months, which will, sorry, I'm speaking. If people could stop heckling me while I'm speaking. Thank you very much. So we will be bringing forward an active travel charter, which will make clear all of the work we're going to do on active travel going forward and how we will ensure that residents are listened to when it comes to active travel, which appears to be the exact opposite to what the party opposite are currently doing, when we have 61% of residents in the Deans and Montague area who are crying out for a low traffic neighbourhood in their area, and the Conservative councillors in an unholy alliance with the Lib Dem councillors are saying no to those residents and are delaying the implementation of that low traffic neighbourhood. We, in contrast, are listening to local residents, and we will continue to do that. That is our approach on active travel, listening to local residents, and we will push forward that over the next few months and years in our commitment to active travel.
Thank you. The next one is Councillor Brett to Councillor Mason.
Mr. Mayor, I think you might have missed.
What have I done? Sorry, yes, whoever. I didn't see, but I didn't see your hand.
Mr. Mayor, it's not very generous. Thank you. So following on there, Councillor Costigan, can the portfolio holder tell us why the Deans and Montague low traffic neighbourhood has not been installed, despite the overwhelming support from local residents? Overwhelming.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. And I know Deans and Montague, the Deans and Montague area is in your ward, and I know you have very much stood up for local residents there. As I've said, 61% of residents in the Deans and Montague area want the low traffic neighbourhood implemented in their area, but there is an alliance of the Conservative group and the Lib Dem group on this issue, where they have called in the low traffic neighbourhoods and Fisher's Lane in order to delay the implementation. I'm not surprised by the Conservatives, but I must say I am hugely disappointed by the Lib Dems, who do talk the talk on this issue, but are singularly unable to walk the walk. On this issue, in terms of the Conservatives' position in calling this in, I have to say they have been consistent in one thing all the way along the line, and that is in not wanting to listen to local people. They didn't support our final say consultation, and we were in this chamber and across the way on numerous occasions when they objected to us giving local people the chance to have a final say on the low traffic neighbourhoods. And now they don't support the majority of people in Deans and Montague who want to have their low traffic neighbourhood. They don't seem to be able to listen to local people, which is hugely disappointing. But as I say, not surprising. It's what I would expect of you guys. On the contrary, we have listened to local people. Where low traffic neighbourhoods were not supported, we have removed them. Where they are supported by residents, we are full steam ahead and will make them permanent. And I hope that the Overview and Scrutiny Commission will agree this after the call in this week. And I am sure the residents of Deans and Montague will be delighted when we can tell them that sense has prevailed and they have been listened to.
Thank you. The next one is Councillor Brett to Councillor Mason.
Can the leader give us more details on the Armed Forces Covenant and what this means to forces families in Ealing?
Councillor Mason.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was delighted to be able to attend the base of 562 Squadron RLC in Southall with yourself, Mr. Mayor, last week to sign the renewed Armed Forces Covenant on behalf of the Council and in the presence of Her Majesty's Representative Deputy Lieutenant. The Covenant is a promise that we make as a Council alongside the public, private and voluntary sectors locally to those who serve or who have served in our armed forces. We're pledging that all those who serve or have served their country will be treated fairly, that their service will be recognised and remembered, and that, crucially, we will do everything that we can to ensure that they face no disadvantage as a result of their service. By renewing the Covenant, we are promising to redouble those efforts to recognise and mitigate the special challenges that face serving members of the armed forces, veterans and their families. And to give a few examples, to recognise that the mobile nature of life that faces the forces and can lead to disadvantage when forces families apply to help with housing. So we exempt those forces members and veterans from the usual residency requirements. The same mobility makes it harder for forces families to get schools places, So we've changed our school's admission policy to make it easier for forces families. We're committing the council to begin a forces-friendly employer, recognising the huge range of transferable skills held by those who've served, and adjusting our recruitment processes to make them inclusive and accessible for veterans, with the aim of tackling the high unemployment rates amongst veterans. And we're ensuring that the training and skills programmes that we offer and our partners deliver are relevant and tailored to veterans. Mr. Mayor, we owe a debt of gratitude to all those who have served and their families, and reviewing the covenant is our first step in repaying that debt.
Thank you. Councillor Brad, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do. Can the leader give us any more information about Ealing's plans to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd be delighted to. I want Ealing to be at the forefront of the celebrations for this incredibly historic occasion of Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee, a feat achieved by no other monarch. We saw in Ealing at the time of the Diamond Jubilee that there is a huge appetite across our 7 towns to mark the Queen's service to our country. We spoke at the start of this evening's meeting about those who wish to drive us apart, and the Platinum Jubilee should be a great opportunity to bring communities together in collective thanks. It's with this in mind, a cross-council working party has been established to design a comprehensive programme of activities for the borough, including making arrangements for the lighting of a Platinum Jubilee beacon. This is one I really hope that we can get delivered, a belated commemoration of a Victoria Cross recipient, and we hope involving the RAF Northolt, and perhaps even a Battle of Britain memorial flight. Let's see if we can get it done. Supporting a scheme of street and community and school celebrations, as well as a number of other exciting opportunities. Ones that I hope may entice Her Majesty to pause for a while in our borough on one of her many commutes along the M4 or the A40 to Windsor Castle from Buckingham Palace. I'm sure the whole borough would wish for the opportunity to thank her for her steadfast service and leadership over the past 7 decades and more.
Councillor Milliken will ask second supplementary.
Yeah, thank you very much. And so in the spirit of this evening, and I'm obviously more than happy to support what's said, and as the leader knows, the covenant was introduced originally by the Conservative and Lib Dem coalition government, so we have a genuine cross-party. So I'm going to toss him a really easy supplementary this evening, because I was going to ask about school places and you've answered it already. So I'm sure you would agree with me that it's an excellent part of the covenant that armed forces, children of armed forces personnel are given priority to attend the school of their choice. So I offer that question to you, Councillor Mason.
Mr. Mayor, in the spirit of this evening, but also in the spirit of brevity, I would say that I would agree, and Councillor Milliken, and I'd say to all members of the council, and I'd also say to veterans, and I'd say to those who are serving members of the forces, this isn't just a commitment by the council, it's also a personal commitment. As the child of 2 serving members of the armed forces, this is something that I take seriously in my role as leader of this council, and armed forces and veterans will always have a special place in this borough.
The next question, Councillor Dubrovska to Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Which councillors have not attended a meeting that counts towards a councillor's attendance record under section 85(2) of the Local Government Act 1972 since the virtual meeting regulations expired in May?
Mr. Mayor, I fear the non-partisan nature of our questioning probably is going to get a bit of a challenge here. Mr. Mayor, to ensure the compliance with the pandemic lockdown, the government temporarily enabled local government business to be transacted online until the 17th of May 2001. Despite lockdown having not yet ended, with the Local Government Association led by the Conservative Party encouraging the government to relent, and with considerable concerns over novel coronavirus strains, potential spikes in infection, alongside low and sluggish vaccination rates, the government refused to extend virtual meetings or to legislate for the use of hybrid meetings. So, Mr. Mayor, since May 17, all councillors, bar councillors Crawford, Lasardi, Darmy, Deer, Byrne, Camadou, Rothwell, Murta, Aslam, Mann, Chauhan and Dinser, have all attended in-person council meetings. All councillors have participated in hybrid meetings, attended residents through casework and participated as members of the council. Councillor Broska will note from the councillors that I have listed, they are either clinically vulnerable or extremely vulnerable, care for those who are clinically vulnerable or extremely vulnerable, or have volunteered to make way for other councillors to attend in-person meetings in line with public health and safety requirements of our buildings, thereby allowing the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats to send their full delegations.
Do you want to ask supplementary, Councillor De Broska?
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Could you let me know why a dispensation is then needed in order to allow councillors who are unable to attend full council other meetings in order to carry on not attending in person?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Broska will look around the room and she will see a limited number of seats that can be filled by members of this council. And she will look at her own benches and she will see that the overwhelming majority of her group are seated. The parties opposite broke a gentle persons agreement at the end of lockdown to provide a proportionate delegation of each of our groups to be able to manage the requirements of our estate and our staff to ensure that we enabled social distancing in all of our meetings. Despite that gentle persons agreement that I was privy to at Constitutional Review Group, party opposite has absolutely reneged on their deal. They have been unfair and hypocritical in the way that we have handled this situation. So we have worked on the basis over the last few months to ensure that we can get the maximum number of our councillors to attend meetings where they have the ability. We have clinically vulnerable and extremely vulnerable councillors who your government, because they refuse to alter the rules around hybrid meetings, insist attending this meeting and insist attending in person. And I think that is disgraceful, both in terms of our expectations of public servants. So I would say to the party opposite, you broke the gentle persons agreement. You broke that agreement. So when we come forward to propose a dispensation,
let the councillor speak, please.
When we come forward to propose a dispensation for those people who have made way for your councillors to have their attendance rates, we will, as a group, defend their rights to continue to represent their residents, which they have continued to do wholeheartedly and passionately, despite the rules that have been enforced on them by the government.
Thank you.
On a point of personal explanation, Mr. Mayor, there was no gentle persons agreement. There was always a disagreement with the majority party wanting to restrict attendance, the opposition parties wanting to allow full attendance.
Well,
I'm afraid your recollection of events is different to mine.
Okay, we move on to the next question. Councillor Dadwal to Councillor Costigan. When you have a second supplementary, please make sure I see you. Yes, Councillor Jammu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the leader, can he please confirm why the council is continuing to implement COVID safe regulations in our buildings? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the reason that the council continue to implement safe COVID measures is to protect our councillors and our staff. We are not out of the pandemic. We continue to face regulations suggested by government, followed by Councillor Conti, not seemingly by any of the other members of the opposite group, because there are staff members and councillors who have unfortunately contracted the coronavirus. Every person in this room has the experience of a friend or a family member who has suffered serious injury or unfortunately has lost their lives to this virus. At the conclusion of the last council meeting in July, a meeting that I had to attend as a councillor to be in my place, having had my first vaccination, what happened? I contracted coronavirus. The reason that we continue to insist that we mask up, and I doubt all councillors opposite have all got reasons not to be currently masked up, the reason that we ask that is to protect our staff, to protect the public. And what a terrible message of leadership, it sends to the public, to our staff, and to this authority, for the party opposite to continue to operate in the way that they do. So I'd say to all council members, and I'd say to all council staff, please continue to do right by your residents. Please continue to do right by your staff. Take a precautionary and measured approach to the way that we deal with this pandemic. We are not out of the woods yet.
Thank you. The next question, Councillor Dadwal to Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and apologies for not turning on my camera, but my device just simply won't let me. Can the portfolio holder give us an update on COP26 and work the council is doing to tackle the climate crisis?
Thank you, Councillor Dadwal, for the question. In terms of COP26, which is the Conference of the Parties conference, which is taking place in Glasgow, the council is taking a two-pronged approach, I guess you'd say. So on the one hand, there is the actual high-level negotiations that are happening in Glasgow, and they are negotiations between countries on a national level. So it might seem that there wasn't a lot of space for Ealing Council in that. But in fact, we are a part of the Local Government Association, which is the umbrella body for all of the local councils in the country. And through that, our voice is being heard in those negotiations. And a big part of what we're pushing for is to have a chapter on local government included in the agreement, because at the moment it actually doesn't include local government or local cities at all. It's totally based on a national level. And if we want to make a difference in terms of the climate emergency, it's actually local councils that will be doing that work. So we do need to be included in the agreement. So we are working through the Local Government Association to have that chapter included. There's also what's called the Nationally Determined Contributions, NDCs, which are basically, the agreement that each country makes as to what they will do to achieve zero carbon. And as part of that, we're pushing through the Local Government Association for the UK to include local government in that, so that there will be requirements on local councils and, crucially, funding for local councils in order to be able to contribute to that. In terms of the second prong of our approach, this can all seem like it's very high level, and it is. So we want to make sure local people understand what it's all about and are able to make changes in their lives that can contribute to this. So as part of that, we're running a series of news stories during the weeks coming up to COP26, where we'll be doing explainer articles so people can understand in layman's language what getting to net zero is all about. And we're going to be focusing on energy efficiency, active travel, and biodiversity in particular. We're also calling on the public to nominate local climate leaders, people who are doing this kind of stuff in their everyday life. And we're asking for people to go one step greener. And we'll be doing a lot of work on social media in order to raise the profile of that work. We're working really closely with Act for Ealing, who are our new climate action hub. They're a group of climate activists in Ealing who the council's been working closely with. And we've worked with them to create a resource pack for schools and toolkits that can be used as part of the curriculum. We will also be lighting up the town hall green for the COP26 fortnight. And I'm glad to say there will be no increase in our carbon emissions. We just put a green filter in front. I'll quickly just say, Mr. Mayor, because the second part of the question was what we're doing about the climate emergency here in Ealing. That's a list as long as your arm. So I will just say that we are a leader in West London on delivering green homes improvements. We're retrofitting council housing. We're coming forward with a new food strategy, which will include looking at council catering and schools catering. We will be launching our new biodiversity action plan. We're doing cycle schemes, we're doing school streets, we're bringing in permanent low traffic neighbourhoods, and we're rolling out food waste collections. I
Thank
hear people
you.
shouting, time's up. Time is almost up for the planet, and that's why we need to focus on this stuff now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dadwal, you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that, Councillor Costigan. Does the cabinet member think that the government is doing enough to tackle the climate crisis?
Thank you, Councillor Dadwal.
Yeah, we are starting once this question is answered.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Dadwal, for this supplementary. Do I think that the government is doing enough to tackle the climate crisis? The simple answer is no. I think that they have a real problem with ambition, for starters. 2/3 of local councils, including Ealing, have signed up to reach net zero by 2030. I'm afraid the government has only signed up to reach net zero by 2050. So there's a real paucity of ambition. We in Ealing want to retrofit as many of our council homes as possible. We need funding from government to do that. So far, we've funding to retrofit 66 council homes. We have 15,000 council homes. So that is really not going to make the impact we need. Today, they've made an announcement about heat pumps replacing boilers. They said they will subsidise 30,000 heat pumps a year across the whole of the UK. Every year, 1.5 million boilers are changed in the UK. So 30,000 is a drop in the ocean. And I'm afraid that the government is fiddling while Rome burns, really, on these issues. Of course, the local Conservatives are acting very similarly. Every active travel project we bring forward, they have objected to. So I'm afraid instead of what we want, which is zero carbon from this government and this local Conservative party, we are getting zero ambition.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Precisely as the Leader of the Opposition pointed out, we are moving to the next item now, opposition motion for debate. And I will call Councillor Stafford again to present it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't think it needs to be said, or doesn't have to be said, but I think it's appropriate to be said at the start of this motion to once again thank the council officers for all their hard work during the pandemic and their continuing hard work for the residents of this borough. But as the world begins to return to some form of normality, thank goodness, and in this country, largely due to the very successful vaccination programme, and on that note, obviously, I encourage anyone who is eligible for a top-up vaccination to get it as soon as possible. As we return to some form of normality, some of the services that the council rightly had to suspend during that pandemic are still not restarted, or indeed there seems to be no plan to restart them. And there are a number of these, but I picked out 4 in our motion, but I'm sure colleagues across the council may have others. The first is Gurnell. Now, Gurnell Swimming Pool was a vital service that needs to be reopened as soon as possible. And we have seen the council's own report, which says that it would cost around 4 to 5 million to get that pool reopened. And we think on this side, that's 4 to 5 million pounds worth spending in order to get that pool reopened as soon as possible. It was over 6 years ago now that the council decided to replace that swimming pool, and we still don't have any prospect of a new swimming pool coming to that site. Gurnell was on the forward plan. It now seems to have disappeared off the forward plan. We don't know what's happening. So rather than stalling, prevaricating, this council should commit the money to reopen that pool as soon as possible. And we would take no lessons from councillors opposite when they say, oh, well, no, the site's run down. This council, the Labour council, has been in charge for nearly 12 years. If anyone has run it down over 12 years, it is this Labour council. And it shouldn't be a surprise that if you don't invest in the service, things get run down and fewer people use them. So now is the chance to invest in that site and to give people who want to participate in swimming, which is vital for recovery for many things, including COVID, a chance to do so. The second is over Pitshanger Library. Again, it's one of the few libraries in the borough that this council closed, then said would reopen under community library status, which has still not reopened. And as children in the area are trying to catch up on the schooling that they missed, such services like Pitshanger Library are vital for them to, as a learning resource and a place to study. When is the council going to come up with a plan to reopen Pitshanger Library? Ward forums. We've just had a discussion, a good cross-party agreeing discussion on David Amos, where we said the interaction between politicians and the public, elected representatives and those who elect them, is absolutely vital. And we think ward forums were a vital part of that. An excellent way that residents can interact with us with, and I think this is important, a meagre but welcome budget, so that residents can direct some of the council tax that they pay to projects that benefit their immediate local area. And we want to know, when can those ward forums restart with the appropriate officer support, and that the budgets that were allocated to those ward forums can be spent.
1 minute left.
Thank you. The final one we picked up on is about Ealing's recycling. Now, as Ealing's recycling figures nosedive, rather than making recycling easier in this borough, the administration continues to put up barriers. They're going to close the Acton dump at the end of the year. And they continue to force people to book online, with all the associated cost of having to run a website that forces people to book online. Rather, and we can understand why that might have been necessary during the immediate part of the pandemic, when there were queues outside those recycling centres. Those have gone. Let's scrap this system and allow people to go and recycle as easily as possible. Mr. Mayor, I'm trying not to be critical here. I'm simply asking the question. These are services that the residents of this borough expect this council to provide.
Time is up.
Where is the plan, Mr. Mayor, for them to have those services once again?
Thank you. Councillor Conti will second the opposition motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, as Councillor Stafford has already said, we wanted to take this opportunity to thank council officers for all their work over the last 18 months in these very difficult times. Not only has COVID tragically robbed nearly 900 families in the borough of loved ones, but it's also robbed children of their education, young people of opportunities such as learning how to swim, a collective strain on the mental health of so many, cancelled hospital appointments, businesses that have buckled under the pressure of restrictions, and access to services that people depend on, such as libraries, day centres and youth centres, curtailed to stop the spread of the virus. The impact of all of this will surely be felt for many years to come. In July, the remaining economic restrictions were lifted, and with a disease that thrives on social interactions, we are all dependent and thankful of the almost 95 million doses that have been given over the last 10 months, which have provided a ring of protection against severe disease for so many, saving thousands of lives in the process. Whilst the fight against the virus continues, we also need to ensure that COVID doesn't continue to rob us of the things that are so vital for our community. We need to ensure that residents get the services they deserve. There's still no plan, as Councillor Stafford has said, to reopen Glenelg. We know the benefits of keeping fit, not only on our mental health, but also on tackling obesity, which is one of the biggest risk factors for severe disease in COVID. The hundreds of children who each year are missing out on learning to swim for the first time. The council is relying on residents having to travel further afield to access leisure facilities, which disproportionately affects the most vulnerable in our community who will find this most difficult. We need to ensure that the thousands of residents once again can access this vital facility. When will the council come forward with a comprehensive plan to reopen Glenelg? Over recent months, as Hanger Hill Ward councillors, we've been teaming up with the great people at Lagercam to clean up our local area. Though there's never an excuse of fly tipping, we need to ensure that residents have proper access to refuse and recycling services without barriers. We need to make access to these centres as easy as possible. Why can residents not drive in to use the services? Why are they still having to book online? Even before the pandemic, the council failed to deliver on a number of services. We heard tonight from the petitioner with the closure of a number of youth services in the borough in recent years, in comparison, as they highlighted, to Hillingdon and Hounslow. The council is passing on their duty on the shoulders of residents for things such as running local libraries, volunteers to help clean our streets, whilst at the same time removing opportunities for residents to directly hold us accountable at ward forums. It is time that the council come forward with a plan for Glenelg, remove barriers to accessing refuse services, ensure all libraries are open as soon as possible, and to reinstate ward forums so we can be held directly accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Costigan, you want to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to take up too much of everyone's valuable time on this deeply irresponsible Conservative motion, so I'm just going to focus on one area. Prime Minister may have told us all to get back to the office, but most responsible employers, including the government's own civil service, are remaining cautious in order to protect the health of their workers and of members of the public. At Ealing Council, we are also prioritising the health of our staff and our residents. But as a matter of fact, we've also discovered that some of the changes we made during COVID make sense and provide a better service to residents. One of these is the move to booked appointments for the Refuse and Recycling Centre in Greenford. It turns out this provides a better service and it helps with our work on tackling the climate emergency. The Greenford depot switched to booked appointments to allow social distancing and to keep residents and staff safe. But there are many other advantages of the new system. For residents, it means a guaranteed slot where they don't have to queue, saving them time. Over the last few months, as the social distancing requirements have been relaxed, we've been able to add more slots. And I'm pleased to report that at the moment, we have more than enough capacity, with 62% of appointment slots booked and residents still able to book at the site where there are free slots. The Greenford site is quite constricted, and there used to be a snake of traffic all down the Greenford Road before COVID. The new booking system has stopped this, and it's reduced air pollution from idling cars. Emissions, climate emergency. It has also made the site much safer. Previously, the number of cars caused health and safety issues, but we're now able to look at ways of opening the site to cyclists, which will further help to reduce car journeys. It's also helped residents to recycle more, as we send them information on how to separate rubbish and recycling as part of each booking. Additionally, with staff no longer having to spend time on traffic management due to the queues, they can instead help residents pick out what can be reused, offering a much better service and increasing our performance when it comes to the circular economy. We ask residents to say what rubbish they're bringing as part of their booking, so we can also redirect them to our curbside collection if it's more appropriate, again making our service more efficient, reducing unnecessary car journeys and the time spent on going to the dump. The new system also offers huge potential for a step change in how we deal with rubbish as part of our mission to reach zero carbon by 2030. Because residents tell us what rubbish they are bringing, we are able to use this data to understand where we can improve our curbside collections. We can identify areas of the borough where there are lower rates of recycling, for example, and then target these with communications. We can also track the number of times people make a booking, which can allow us to identify where businesses, for example, are abusing the system. Our neighbouring boroughs are also using systems, and we all agree that not only does it help keep staff and residents safe, it also improves the service. Mr. Mayor, the Conservative group seem to have unilaterally decided that COVID is over, although they should perhaps tell that to the hundreds of families who have lost people from COVID over the last few weeks. And the Conservative group also seem to have decided that they would prefer to stick with an outdated and, we now see, inefficient system that does nothing to improve our work on climate change. In contrast, Ealing Labour will continue to focus on keeping our staff and residents safe, but at the same time, we're also delivering a much better service which will significantly contribute to our ability to tackle climate change. Vote against this irresponsible and quite backward-looking motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although COVID is still with us, many residents have now been vaccinated, double vaccinated, or hopefully in the next few months will get their COVID booster jab if they're entitled to it. There is a point where we need to move as much as possible to where we were 2 years ago before COVID. Many people have not had access to some of the services that they used to have, and we need to find ways of getting more of those services back to people in a safe way. And many of these services can be done if we think about it. Many people in Southfield have attended the virtual equivalents to ward forum meetings, but some of those residents wanted to attend a face-to-face meeting. There is nothing like seeing the body language when you're chatting to residents to find how your ideas are going down in a meeting, or whether they believe what you're talking about. On a Zoom call, some of those things are not quite so possible. 2 weeks ago in my local ward, I attended a face-to-face meeting with the local Safer Neighbourhood team and residents. And we sat there reasonably safely apart from each other outside. And that worked really well. And that was the first police meeting for a long time. Many people want to get back to where they were 2 years before. They want ward forums back, even if they have virtual and non-virtual ones. And they want the budget so they can see and control where some of that money goes locally. They want to influence their councillors and the council into spending money in things that will work for to improve their area. I know that when Councillor Mason, you became the council leader, you indicated you wanted to run an open council, as well as referring to engaging with residents. And part of that, I believe, is a ward forum system that works, amongst other systems as well. Therefore, we feel it's time to restart back up ward forums or hybrid ward forums as well. In terms of the refuse and recycling centres, I attended the Acton one recently with some garden waste, and other people were attending there. But no one bothered to check. I'd arrived early, I'd booked using the system, which is not the greatest system in the world. I booked, but no one actually checked whether I was actually valid to be there at that time when I spoke to the two gentlemen there. We think it's time to not use the booking system. I know you gave some potential advantages of a booking system, but in Acton, where that centre is going to be closed down, sadly, people will be forced to either go to Greenford or elsewhere, travelling long distances to and fro, causing more pollution and not helping your zero carbon targets. But also the high cost of the bulky items collection service does not help those people. Even the officers admitted fly tipping will increase when centres like this close. So the Liberal Democrats believe that we need to look at and review which council services we can offer a more face-to-face option, and in a safe way move towards those so we can get back to where we were before COVID.
1 minute.
There are many people who don't have access, the 10% of people who don't have the IT or the infrastructure or the Wi-Fi, and they can't make bookings in the way that you assume everyone can. And therefore we need to go back to where we can try and make sure we bring back many of those services to some of those vulnerable people who don't have access to them now. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Raza.
Okay. It's interesting and disappointing, actually, that the opposition have chosen to raise these local services and they seek to conflate these issues with nothing to do with COVID, which actually is a really serious issue at the moment, which a lot of people, it affects them greatly. We all know that the Gurnell Leisure Centre was in need of urgent refurbishment or replacement before the pandemic, and colleagues have actually spoken about that at length at other meetings. We've moved a number of our libraries to community management before the pandemic, and as a consequence of austerity, actually, and that was the only way to sort of keep them open. The other community managed libraries that have reopened successfully are thriving post-pandemic, and there's work going on to do the same with Pitts Hanger. We want that to thrive, and there is work going on to make sure that that happens, and I'm sure you're aware of the work that's going on that's happening. Another positive, obviously, of the 18 months that we've been going through this pandemic, as highlighted by Councillor Costigan, was the booking system of our recycling sites. Greenford residents We're fed up with the snaking traffic, and actually it has really helped that. It's working really well. The waiting times are down, and actually the traffic management around there, I have to say, our police teams and everybody are delighted. Our NHS frontline services have valiantly looked after their patients, often at the cost of their own lives, and delivered fantastic vaccination program. However, we are far from out of the woods already. The case numbers are still going up. Hospitalization of pregnant women and young unvaccinated people continue to rise, and the uptake of the vaccination remains low in some communities. We are constantly in a battle with misinformation which is happening online. The increased air travel is making the possibility of a new variant arriving here just that bit more likely. The government's response to the pandemic has been a catalogue of disasters, U-turns, and utter confusion. And this is what happens when scientifically illiterate people are making the most important decisions for us all. Tragically, our death toll is one of the highest in Europe, and it's brought into sharp focus the consequences of ignoring the advice and experts of scientists. Listening to the independent SAGE meetings every Friday afternoon, I'm not filled with confidence that it is the time that we should just be getting back to business as usual just yet. It took a Labour mayor, Sadiq Khan, to insist that masks are worn on our transport network to keep everybody safe and healthy. Yet increasingly we're encouraged to throw caution to the wind and just continue as before, resigning ourselves, some of our most vulnerable people in our communities to perpetual isolation. Let's not forget that it was a Conservative government who decided to implement austerity, hitting councils like ourselves severely and affecting the very services we're leaning on for a recovery. The COVID pandemic has hit our borough and communities hard. We've all stepped up and played our part. The pressures are, especially under the pressures that we are. Many of our staff have been redeployed to deal with this unique crisis, whilst front-facing services understandably had to close for a while. We had to be agile to adapt to a changing situation. This crisis is far from over, and a risk of a new variant, another lockdown, possibly Christmas without loved ones, as winter pressures of flu and COVID that Councillor Conti ought to know more about, do threaten to attack us again, which is exactly why we're continuing with COVID safety in our buildings. This motion should actually be congratulating the council and the council officers on a successful recovery from the worst of the COVID pandemic, getting practically every service back up and running and working for local residents again. The safety of our staff and our residents is paramount for our COVID response, although it seems not to be the case for our colleagues opposite.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to talk for a few minutes about ward forums. Ealing Broadway ward, when the administration reduced the number of ward forums from 3 to 2 a year, we continued with the third one, ran it informally, we organised it ourselves without officer support, took our own minutes, we arranged the rooms and did everything ourselves. The only problem with that third meeting was that we were told that we could not use it for making decisions about ward forum spending because it wasn't minuted properly by an officer. When the pandemic hit, we continued to hold our ward forums informally via Zoom, which we've continued to do all through until now. But come this autumn, we wanted to try to get back to face-to-face meetings for our residents. When we investigated this, we hit a bit of difficulty. First thing is that the neighbourhood government's offices have all been repurposed, so they're not there to help us and support us. So we went up a management level and said, well, if we make a decision in an informal meeting, can we use that to support a budget decision? I don't know, I'll go away and ask, was the reply. Well, the officer responsible went to the administration, apparently couldn't get an answer from them. The one thing I would like the administration to tell us is, will they back ward forums? Will we be able to hold them in person? Will we have officer support for them? And on the COVID issue, I think you need to think about COVID a little bit harder. Some years ago, in 1950, distemper in dogs was endemic. Endemic means that it's an existing infection that's continuing on in the population. Councillor Donnelly is writing this down, he must have a dog. And it was thought that 2 injections would be enough for life in those days because dogs seemed to be immune. But by about 1960, the amount of virus in the population was suppressed so much that people were finding their dogs going down with distemper because they weren't picking up the natural street immunity that was necessary to reinforce the immune system. That's one of the problems we will find with COVID, that as the vaccinations wane, we become more susceptible. The vaccine will not continue to protect us, which is why we're giving boosters. I'm one of the few people who's actually treated the pandemic. But it's easier to sit back and say, we must protect ourselves, but it can be counterproductive. The time when the Queen goes to a church service without any particular worries, when my 97-year-old mother can go to social events 3 times a week and go shopping and go to get her hair done. The general public do not understand why they cannot meet together with their councillors in ward forums. Please give them back to us.
Thank you. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The pandemic is not over, and it's clearly right that some COVID measures remain in place. Vaccination is the most important way to reduce death and serious illness. We should all be double jabbed, and we should be triple jabbed when our turn comes. Recommended masking and improved ventilation are sensible in many service delivery contexts. And regular symptomless testing, it makes sense for all of us who are out and about. However, the motion identifies a number of council services that have been curtailed for no good reason. I'll go through some of them. It's absurd that Gurnell Leisure Centre continues to lie empty for such a long time. Since an unsuitable redevelopment scheme building extensively on metropolitan land was rightly thrown out in March, it's become even more indefensible for Gurnell to lie locked up. At minimal cost, it could be brought back into use, at least on an interim basis. Families in the local area have to go all the way to Acton and find that facilities such as children's swimming lessons are fully booked up there. The administration must reopen Gurnell. The library service overall was very slow to reopen various libraries, but the extreme case, of course, is Pitshanger Library, where the council continues to drag its feet on the community managed library, which is so strenuously pushed for by local residents and traders who recognise that Pitshanger Library lies at the heart of Pitshanger Lane. The administration must ensure that the Pitshanger Community Library, originally scheduled to open in early 2020, finally opens. The plan to close the Acton Recycling Centre was a great frustration to residents of Acton and South Ealing, as we discussed in the debate on the large petition I brought against that closure to a previous meeting of this council. That remains a deeply counterproductive step, but to add insult to injury, the council persists with the booking system for recycling centres, originally introduced as a temporary measure, but now seemingly, from what we're hearing, a permanent measure, but a permanent frustration to residents who want to do the right thing and take recyclable items too large to fit in their wheelie bin to the recycling centre, would have to jump through the hoops of a particularly badly designed website to do it. The council needs to reintroduce Turn Up and Go recycling centre. So, Mr. Mayor, appropriate COVID measures are still needed, but there needs to be thought about what is appropriate and what was introduced for COVID reasons, but is now irrelevant. So, please, Mr. Mayor, I would urge the administration to reopen these services.
Thank you. Councillor Glant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I just start actually by welcoming Claire Ty to the council. We got to know each other earlier on this year, and we share a deep love for music, which we know transcends politics completely and is a great vehicle for communication. Now, we are coming out of the pandemic, and it's hard for me to understand, Mr. Mayor, why the administration doesn't want to lead that exit. Cautiously, yes, of course, cautiously, but we need to move out of it. I can't count the number of residents I've met since May who bemoan the lack of the Gurnell facility. Closing it has affected family life in the borough. It's worth reopening. Libraries. Now, book lending, of course, may have been overtaken by online access, but libraries offer fantastic service for small children getting out and for students looking for quiet places to work away from home. Everybody understands the need to stagger the access to the recycling centres during the pandemic. Nobody argued with it, but no resident I've met, and I meet hundreds, wants that online bureaucracy to continue as we return to normality. And finally, let's not make ward forums a political football. How many times have we met residents, they're all busy in their own lives, who just don't know who their councillors are? The ward forum's the ideal place for this interface to happen. The first place I ever saw councillors in South Acton reacting with the public. Residents putting up questions about administration, about development, about expenditure. And as everyone says, as all the councillors say, influencing spending, learning about the details of Ealing life that can make all the difference. And Mr. Mayor, I walk past a beautiful pocket garden every day. There was once a rubbish tip. Now, a wonderful little pocket garden that was funded by Ward Forum money. Fantastic. Now, it's clear that colleagues in Southfield want to get these, Lib Dem colleagues in Southfield, want to get these Ward Forums back on track. But I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor, that Labour does. And even long before COVID struck, I detected an eagerness in the administration, as it was, to get rid of Ward Forums as an easily axable expense. I just hope that Labour colleagues haven't lost interest in listening to residents, because residents see that coming a mile off. Mr. Mayor, ward forums are not so expensive to run, but the contact between councillors and the public is absolutely priceless. I'll be firmly supporting this Conservative motion.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, lockdown took over our lives. And what were those of us who suddenly had time on our hands to do with ourselves? Many of us decided to have a clear out. However, with the recycling centres closed, we were stuck holding on to our old stuff for months. Then the centres reopened and the queues of cars were simply frightening, with reports of some drivers were waiting for an hour or two. And the thought of all that pollution from that idling made my heart sink. Well, one day I went to visit family in Milton Keynes when they told me that they no longer had to queue for the dump, as a brilliant new booking system had been introduced. I was just about to suggest we do the same in Ealing, but then, hey presto, great council officer minds think alike, and an announcement is made that we are going to have a booking system of our own. I don't know what floats the boat of the Tory opposition here, but the simple fact is that most of us don't enjoy sitting in unnecessary queues for something so mundane. And as for ward forums, there are such things as financial priorities when you need to spend in a pandemic. Perhaps if we didn't have the government cuts to contend with, then we could go back to having ward forums 3 times a year even. However, we have done an incredible amount to keep the conversation going with our residents. I know I've had some very fruitful meetings with groups of residents, and to go one better, they set the agenda. I'm a member of the High Streets Task Force, and I'm pleased to report the task force is providing significant enhancements to attract people to our town centres and to promote the well-being of local residents, just as a ward forum would. And just look at what we are doing in Northolt. Over the summer, Visions for Northolt was engaging with residents above and beyond any ward forum I have been to. Council officers came out to the people and held events across our parks and community centres, which were extremely well attended. And we as councillors joined in the conversation. We learnt about what our residents want for Northolt, and together we addressed the concerns of residents and found solutions. We know that our residents want to bring the community closer together, and we know how they feel about transport, amenities, and their green spaces. And as for Gurnell and Pitshanger, just imagine where we would be if only the Tory government had deigned to provide proper funding over the past 10 years. What brighter place we would be on these issues. And as for Gurnell, the Tory opposition knows all too well that the site is in no condition to open right now.
1 minute.
So why have we got before us such a mind-blowingly daft motion, Mr. Mayor? It is because the Tories have no vision for Northolt, for Greenford, for Perivale, Acton, Hanwell, Southall or Ealing. Let us just be grateful that we in Labour are in charge here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donnelly, yes. Councillor Rice, can you switch off the mic?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Conti and the Liberal Democrats for being masked. I'm going to refer to part of the motion which is not local, is generic, talks about what is returning to normal. Mr. Mayor, this is a false normality, a false definition of returning to normality. The normality we face in this country is about having the highest number of COVID cases in Western Europe, the highest number of COVID deaths in Western Europe, a rising number of cases, a rising number of deaths, and all the time getting nearer to sleepwalking into a flu epidemic, which could be avoided by maintaining our practices on social distancing, maintaining our practices on mask wearing, practices that the opposition seem unilaterally to have abandoned without announcement, merely by inveigling themselves into every meeting they attend and endangering the health of everyone else in the room in which they sit. Well, they may shake their heads, but frankly, COVID doesn't negotiate. They talk about a vaccine program. Of course, it was a success. We were earlier and it was efficient, but we're no longer in the lead. Our peers in Western Europe, in the Western world, have caught us and have overtaken us because, apart from anything else, we didn't roll out to young people as early as other people did, and we are more apparently affected by anti-vaxxers who will only be encouraged by the attitude of the Conservative front bench this evening. And for Councillor Young to respond to Councillor Raza's point about scientific illiteracy by holding forth on the subject of distemper in the 1950s is frankly almost beyond belief. Every case we have in this country is one case nearer the next mutation. Every mutation that we have in this country, never mind importing, is one mutation nearer the next variant, and that's one variant nearer the next variant that our vaccines won't deal with. It's preposterously irresponsible to think that it doesn't matter now if we're masked, that it doesn't matter how we interact with each other. These things are irresponsible. And I'm trying to rein myself in tonight for all the reasons that we know. But courtesy in dealing with each other doesn't mean that a motion isn't irresponsible, doesn't mean that a motion doesn't endanger the health and the lives of the people of the country. They talk about returning to the office, or the Prime Minister talking about returning to the office. Well, I think it's not the first time that the Prime Minister has led that clarion call. And the last time he did it, it was followed ever so swiftly by the most ignominious retreat into lockdown last Christmas, a point at which we reached the highest level of cases per 100,000 that any country has ever reached in the course of this epidemic. And where are we now? Let's compare ourselves with Japan. Cases so far, UK 8.5 million, Japan 1.7 million. Deaths so far, UK 138,000, Japan 18,000. Last 7 days, cases, UK 265,000, Japan 3,500. We've done it worse than other people. We're still doing it worse than other people. If we can't have the humility and common sense
thank you, Councillor,
and act, then we will sleepwalk into disaster, and we're not going to do that here.
Thank you. I think we should move to vote now. We are running out of time, Councillor Stafford.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. You did overrun in the last one by 5 minutes. So I think we should be allowed to finish our motion by 5 minutes as well, please.
Okay,
And I have a
go
right to
ahead.
sum up.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Mahfouz. It's always interesting to hear from you. Well, the cross-party nature didn't last very long, but let me just go. Councillor Costigan, it's really interesting, actually. Councillor Costigan, I don't think was in the previous administration's cabinet, but it's so quick to have become sounding like an officer. And what we heard from her tonight on the recycling was what was best for the officers at the recycling centre. Now, clearly we have to have them in mind, but what is best for residents is what we are elected to do. And residents tell us day in and day out that they want to be able to recycle more, and the booking system is an impediment to do so. From Councillor Raza, we heard work is going on Pitsanger. Well, that's reassuring all the residents, and thanks for that. Councillor Rice was the only councillor to mention Gurnell in about 1 second, and she just said it's not ready to be open immediately. Well, our motion quite clearly agrees it's not ready to be open immediately, but there should be a plan to open it as soon as possible so that residents can use it. She also said that our motion was mind-numbingly dull. Well, I'm very sorry to have bored her this evening. Perhaps these issues that residents actually care about are mind-numbingly boring to her, but to residents, they're vitally important. And then from Councillor Donnelly, we had a starting point where he said that nobody listened to science, and it was ill-educated people who didn't know the science who were making decisions, and then proceeded to have a rant about the science, which I'm not sure he's qualified to talk about, but that's fine. I think we on this side and residents would be grateful if he showed as much passion about the services that residents were not getting as he did about pontificating to us on his views. I tried to start this motion, and I think all members on this side of the chamber, Conservative and Liberal Democrat, spoke with measured tones about trying to get services restarted for residents. Unfortunately, we didn't receive that from Labour colleagues opposite. And I'd ask them to think again. These are services that residents want to see restart. We want to see a plan to see them restart. Let's have that plan and let's vote in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll move straight to the vote now, and only those present in this room can vote, not those who are virtually attending. So all those in favor of this motion. Okay, all those against this motion. So the motion is lost. We move on to the next motion, which is the majority party motion, and Councillor Johnson will propose.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm proposing tonight because my colleague, Councillor Blacker, is unwell, and so he's often helped me out. And as I can't walk the streets, I can only phone up people. I think it's a fair exchange. I think this is a very, very disappointing motion to have to talk about. When Boris Johnson was elected as Prime Minister, he promised us that he would come up with a miracle cure. Now, I know that it's not easy, and I know Theresa May did try, and then she was shot down by her own members. And I think we can give her credit for trying. The Conservatives have had 13 years to do something about this. They can't be blamed for COVID and all the problems of the fact that we've got an aging population, demographics have changed, we've had COVID, but they can be blamed for the fact that the NHS has been underfunded since they've taken over. And they've had those extra problems of COVID. We know that waiting lists are 2 million or more. We know that in Ealing, we had to work really hard in this chamber and outside to save our hospitals. We're lucky we've still got Ealing Hospital and Charing Cross. And I, like many of my colleagues in this room, are grateful for the care that Charing Cross gave me earlier this year. And I'm also grateful for the care people who came out to help me when I first came out of hospital. We know all those people in the caring professions worked extremely hard and deserve those claps. And we know that this new tax hike, which is appalling, is going to bring in 36 billion, but only 5.4% of it is actually going to go to local authorities. Now that's an appalling small amount, and it's really going to do nothing. I feel sorry for my colleague, Councillor Donnelly, who doesn't know what sort of social care precept we might be asked to put on people later this year. We just don't know where we are. And it's all absolutely shocking when they've had all this time to do this. They've been hyping it up, saying, oh, it's going to be the marvellous answer. And even their own side know that this is not the case. I could quote, but I won't bore you to death, other Conservative councillors in the country who say that by doing this, up till now, people who paid for their own care used to cross-subsidise people from local authorities. Well, that won't be able to happen the same. So the whole thing is going to be destabilised. And I think it's not going to help any of us at all. Nobody wanted people to lose their houses, their relatives or their children, but they still are going to, and nothing is actually going to come anybody's way till 2023. So all of this is a big mess. Now, they could have done things, but in 50 years, this is one of the worst tax rises because it's going to affect all workers, particularly the low paid. But if you're a landlord and you've got lots of different houses you rent out, you're not going to pay a penny extra. Now, that doesn't seem a very fair sort of tax to me. My colleague, Councillor Mahfouz, talked about the cut that people who are on universal credit are facing. Look at what's happening. It's really difficult for people at the moment. As I said, Theresa May did her best, but obviously people were shocked by that. The NHS is so underfunded, it still won't really help. We won't be able to do that much. We'll be still stuck. Ealing at the moment spends about 70 million on social care a year, but we think it will be 80 million next year. We're not going to be able to do a lot. Even if we do put up, oh, sorry, I thought I had loads and loads of time. As you can see, I've been writing all sorts of things. Now, the pandemic, Ealing did a really good job. We helped people get PPE, but I really do think that this motion is saying we're all disappointed. This tax hike is not going to help anybody. The cross-fertilisation is not going to help us at all. And I'm sorry that government didn't speak to local authorities, because we all know Councillor Ellery Ebenezer worked hard and she knew what the situation was like in local authorities. And if you talk to Conservatives privately, they've been disappointed by this as well. So I ask you to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Mason to second this motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to formally second, but if you will beg my indulgence, I'd like to waive my speaking order to Councillor Claire Tighe, given the lateness of the hour, her preparedness to make her maiden speech and her guests in the gallery. And I wonder if you'd indulge me and call her to speak in my place now.
Sure. So shall I keep the order and is that okay? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Tighe, over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for such a kind introduction, and it is an honour to be with you here tonight, to be introduced by you as a mayor and a friend. You get many tips on maiden speeches, so I hope I'm going to do them justice. I want to start by thanking the people of Hebane for voting for me in September's by-election. Hebane is such a special place, and it is my great honour to be elected to serve it. From street parties and carnivals. Is that better? Oh yeah, is that better? Fantastic. From street parties to carnivals, the Allotment Society, to so many active local groups. It's full of people wanting the very best for their families and their neighbours. I want to work with every community and every generation right across Hebane to help shape it and make it an even better place to live. I also want to acknowledge the work of my predecessor, which I heard so much of from residents on the doorsteps. And in doing so, I also want to thank colleagues Labour councillors and MPs who've served with such commitment over the years. Because of their hard work and efforts that went in long before now, I take my place here today on this very ably led Ealing Labour team. Mr. Mayor, the events of last week hang over us. I want to echo words already spoken and extend my sympathies to the Conservative group and to the family and friends of Sir David Amos. Last week's tragic events grieve us all as one, and although we might often differ in how, we know we all share a common purpose in this place to make a difference to people's lives. Mr. Mayor, Ealing is personal to me. It's where my parents, aunts and uncles came to build their lives, and it gave them a footing, a place to live, love, work and call home. Arriving from the west of Ireland to the west of London, they worked in construction, the NHS, as taxi drivers and in hospitality. They worked hard to contribute. They wanted to give opportunities to the next generation and in some small way, leave the world a better place. Many of them have now passed on, but their legacy and values live on. I find their footsteps everywhere around these streets, and I stand here today because of them. And tonight's motion is about older generations and how we care for them. As someone who looks after an elderly uncle every week, I know how important social care is, not just for those who need the care, but for their family, friends, and support networks too. It is a problem of our age, and it's a problem that needs fixing. But Mr. Mayor, it's not done with a tax hike on working people while millionaires pay nothing more. It needs a fair and sustainable funding plan, and the government is wrong and short-sighted in its approach. Local councils on the forefront of the social care challenge should be involved in the government's plans, informing them. This care crisis comes on the back of a punishing pandemic and also a decade of underfunding of our NHS. It's about priorities, and coming out of this pandemic as we go forward, I can't think of anything more important than standing up for the health and the welfare of the people of this borough who we represent. I was told, Mr. Mayor, to look up when I got to the town hall to find the sign that reads Respus Prospus, which I'm told means look forwards, look backwards, look forwards. From this place, we get to shape what going forwards looks like. When it comes to social care, we need to find a way to fund it that doesn't unfairly burden those who can ill afford it. I support this motion that sends a clear message to the government to change course. The good people of Hebane and this borough deserve more. Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations on your maiden speech. Councillor Milliken will speak now.
Can I offer my congratulations to Councillor Ty for your maiden speech, and I'm sure that you'll be an excellent servant to the people of Hebane, and so well done. You've broken the duck a bit tonight, so well done. Now, I don't go to many meetings with Councillor Mason. I'm sure he's pleased about that, but I did go to one relatively recently at Gunnersbury Sports Centre. We were there, the two mayors were there, Mayor of Ealing, Mayor of Hounslow, Chief Executive was there, officers were there, and so on. There were what, 50 people? I don't know, 100 people, I don't know. There's quite a lot of people there, quite a tight space, and then we walked all around the centre and so on. Not a single person wore a mask. Councillor Mason did not wear a mask. The mayors did not wear a mask. So I think perhaps double standards mentioned here tonight. Now, the problem of how social care, the problem of how to fund social care has been ducked by successive governments, Labour, Coalition, Conservative, for decades. The £36 billion package that Councillor Johnson mentioned will reform adult social care by introducing, amongst other things, a lifetime cap of £86,000. And it will also help to tackle NHS backlogs. Now, I accept that tax increases to fund this breaks a manifesto pledge, but these steps are responsible, they're necessary, and they are fair. They give our health and social care services the backing and funding they need to rebuild after the pandemic. Now, like Janus in Roman mythology, Labour are typically looking both ways at once. In one direction, they're complaining about extra funding from extra taxes, whilst in the other direction, they call for more funding for more investment. Now, an incredible £36 billion extra will be invested in health and care over the next 3 years, with, as Councillor Johnson said, 5.4 billion in adult social care. Now, in order to fund such a significant increase, the government has had to make some tough and responsible choices to increase taxes. Now, I sit on this side of the chamber and I am no fan of increasing taxes, but we can all agree that taxes should be levelled fairly, with more levied on those more able to pay. The health and social care levy is based on the principle that every individual should contribute towards their means, according to their means. There will be an increase of 1.25% in dividend tax, as well as 1.25% in social insurance contribution.
1 minute.
So despite assertions by the Labour motion today, the levy will be progressive. 6.2 million people earning less than primary threshold or lower profits of £9,500 will not pay the levy. A typical basic rate taxpayer earning £24,000 will contribute £180, while a higher rate taxpayer earning £67,000 will contribute £715. So this means that half of the revenue of the levy will be paid by the highest 14% of earners, of those earning, and all of those earning less than 9,500 will not pay. Now, we can all agree that, and they have not mentioned this in their motion, it's all about national insurance.
Thank
but
you.
the dividend tax is, as we all understand, paid by the higher earning people, and they will be paying the 1.25%. So I'm no fan of raising taxes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
But this government is committed to taking difficult decisions.
Thank you. Councillor, we've reached 9:30 and we need to decide if you want to continue until 10 p.m. or shall we conclude it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Conclude it? Okay, we will move on to the vote now. And again, those who are present in the room will be able to vote on the motion. So I'm asking again those who are in favor of the motion. Agreed? Those who are against? So the motion is carried. I move on to item 13. There are motions which are not for debate. The first motion is on Afghanistan, and the Conservative group submitted an amendment. So I'm going to ask again to vote on the amendment first. Those who are in favor of the amendment, against, abstentions. So the amendment is lost. Now I'm asking on the actual motion, those who are in favor of the motion. So everyone is in favor, so the motion is carried. Was there any against? No. The next motion, again, not for debate, is titled Ealing's Plan for Good Jobs. Those in favor? Against? So the motion is carried.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, you didn't vote on our amendment.
Sorry? Is that okay? Yeah. The next motion is titled COP26 and the climate crisis. And on that, again, Liberal Democrats have submitted an amendment, and I'm going to take the vote on amendment first. Those in favor? Against? So the amendment is lost. And on the actual motion now, those in favor? Against? So the motion is carried. The final motion not for debate is on the, and this is submitted by the Conservative group and is regarding toll buildings. There was an amendment. There was an amendment on this motion that was submitted by the Labour group. So I'm going to ask.
So this is the one that was also a Lib Dem amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So there were two amendments. Okay, there were two amendments on this. So I'm going to ask on the Labour amendment first. Those in favor? Against? Okay, the amendment is carried. There is another amendment from Liberal Democrats. Those in favor? Against? So the amendment is not carried. Now I'm asking on the actual motion. Those in favor? Against? So the motion is carried. Yeah, the motion is carried as amended. The next item is item 14 on the agenda. That is dispensations for non-attendance. Again, the Liberal Democrat and Conservative group would like to move an additional motion on this report, which can be found in the amendments document that has been circulated tonight. Yes, Councillor Shaw.
Just on the point of order, Mr. Mayor, this is an officer report, so I don't believe it can be amended. The opposition can vote against it, but I don't believe they can amend it.
I'll respond to that, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we are going to take a vote on it anyway. Yeah, we are going to take a vote on it.
If it helps the Mayor, I'm moving a motion understanding order 1219 to amend a report submitted to the council by an officer.
Was there anything I missed?
We'd like a recorded vote.
Okay, if it's recording vote, then they are enough to go for recording vote. Okay, then we will go for recording vote. Paul, you want to lead on that?
Yeah, I will do, Mr. Mayor.
First, we will vote on the amendment, then we will vote for the actual motion.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a recorded vote on the additional motion submitted by the...
And again, it's only those who are present here can vote on it.
What I'm going to do, councillors, to try and make sure I don't miss anybody, is I'm going to... I've got a list of the councillors in the room, so I'm going to take it alphabetically and ask for, against, abstention. And at the end, I will double check that I haven't missed any councillor. So I hope you'll bear with me. So recorded votes. First, M. Ahmed, for, against, or abstention.
Abstain. M. Ahmed, that's me.
Oh, forgive me, Kev. I'll come to you at the end, Mr. Mayor. I'm terribly sorry. Yeah, Councillor J. Anand. That's against. Councillor Ball. Councillor Block. Councillor Conti. Councillor Costigan. Councillor Dubrovska. Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Gallant. Councillor Gordon. Councillor Goulade. Councillor Johnson. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kumar. Councillor Mahfouz, Councillor Malcolm, Councillor Manro, Councillor Mason, Councillor Milliken, Councillor Mohan, Councillor Nagpal, Councillor Pada, Councillor Raza, Councillor Rice, Councillor Rooney, Councillor Sabias, Councillor Sharma, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Stafford, Councillor Steed, Councillor Tighe, Councillor Taylor, not here, Councillor Young, I think I've missed Councillor Brett, and yes, Councillor Jammu as well, yeah.
You have missed Councillor Mida.
And Councillor, yeah, and Deputy Mayor and Mayor.
Abstention.
So the additional motion, the amendment with the additional motion is defeated. Mr. Mayor, you can move on to the report.
Shall we just ask the whips to vote on that? Shall we just ask the whips to vote, because I can see the way it is going. Okay.
Okay, so this is now on the report, on the recommendations in the report on dispensations. Councillor J. Anand, Councillor Ball, Councillor Block, Councillor Brett, Councillor Conti, Councillor Costigan, Councillor Dubrovska, Councillor Donnelly, Councillor Gallant, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Goulet, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Kumar, Councillor Mahfouz, Councillor Malcolm, Councillor Manro, Councillor Mason, Councillor Milliken, Councillor Mohan, Councillor Nagpal, Councillor Pada, Councillor Raza, Councillor Rice, Councillor Rooney, Councillor Sabias, Councillor Sharma, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Stafford, Councillor Steed, Councillor Tige, Councillor Young, Deputy Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Abstain.
So the report's recommendations are
Councillor
agreed.
Jammu is left.
Oh, forgive me, Councillor. It's Councillor Jammu. Yeah, thank you. So the report with and recommendations are agreed.
Agreed.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, councillors. We've got the proposed changes to the constitution, and shall we take it as agreed, or you agreed? Okay, this is agreed. Treasury Management Outturn 2021, are the recommendations noted? There are no urgent key decisions exempted from call-in, so we skip that. And again, the appointment to the committees and other bodies, agreed? Agreed. Then we reach to the next date of meeting, and that would be on the 14th of December. Once again, congratulations to the new councillor on maiden speech, and I look forward to seeing you on the next occasion. Thank you.